All right, chapter 18, subdivision developments. In this chapter, we're going to talk about various methods of developing and subdividing land, identify the impacts of environmental regulations and other laws on sales, health, and safety of building regulations. We're going to start off, let's see, assemblage is combining two or more lots into one larger parcel. That increase is known as plottage value. Don't worry, you don't need to add that to your terms and definitions to study. Subdivider is somebody who buys undeveloped acreage and divides it into smaller lots for sale to individuals or to developers, or sometimes the subdivider is the developer and they build on it themselves. And then a developer is the one who actually builds the homes, and then they sell them. So in New Jersey, when a second lot is sold off of a larger parcel, it is now classified as a subdivision. Now, the state of New Jersey allows municipalities to determine what constitutes a major subdivision that requires a public hearing and what constitutes a minor subdivision, which does not. So minor subdivisions, one or two lots, I guess, depends on the municipality. They leave it up to them to decide. Do not require new streets or off-site developments or public hearings for approvals. Major subdivisions require public hearings to get approvals. They have a lot more issues to address and must give the public an opportunity to pose questions. Some examples of issues for larger subdivisions are roads, traffic, the burden on the school districts, public works services, the water, sewer, etc. How are they going to get rid of that waste, police and fire, depending on the size of the subdivision, a lot more families in the area, it's going to use a lot more of the public's resources. So land planning precedes the actual subdivision process, which must comply with the municipality's master plan. The master plan is the plan that every municipality has on how they're going to manage their community. Everything from sewer and water supply, sewer waste disposal, water supply, sewage disposal, traffic, schooling, education, emergency response, all kinds of stuff like that. So dedication is, well, let's see, I skipped this. Planning boards are the planning commissioners are the ones that examine these the plans of any new community to see if they fit within their master plan, or how they can make adjustments to make it. Dedication is when a private landowner gives land to the government for public use, like streets, schools, and parks. So sometimes their subdivisions have extra land on them where maybe they made a road. Are they going to keep them private, or are they going to dedicate them to the municipality and they're going to become public streets? Assurance, they need to get assurance by bonding that the sewer and street costs are going to be paid for. Compliance with the zoning ordinances governing the use and lot size, fire and safety ordinances, building and construction codes. And they're going to need a percolation test, or for short, a PERC test, is a test of how well the soil absorbs liquids for drainage, runoff, septic system disposal, and its capacities to be able to hold water. All right, so page 340, let's highlight dedication of land for streets, schools, or parks. That's what dedication is. It's giving land to the government. And then a percolation test tests the soil to see how well it absorbs liquids, for not just for runoff, but also if there's going to be a septic system installed. Septic systems, then you need to make sure that the ground can absorb that liquid. If it's a high clay content, it may not be able to absorb water fast enough, and then that can pose a problem for that intended development if there's no way to dispose of it. If the ground can't filter that wastewater, you may have an issue. Okay. So you guys got that? All right. So here is how they do a perk test. I got a little video here, show you how to do a perk test from this old house.
One of the first things to consider when building a house like this out in the country is a septic plan. What to do with the waste and water that needs to leave that building. Now, it needs to go into a septic system. There's a couple of key components to a septic system. One is a septic tank. Now, this tank will accept waste and water. Now, the solids will stay in the tank and be broken down over time by bacteria. But the water that will pass through the tank will now go out through a leach field. Now, a leach field is a series of pipes, perforated pipes, that sit below the substrate of the soil, and the water will trickle or drip down through the ground. Now, to determine if you can even have a septic system, it starts with a perk test. Brendan Zabricki's with the town of Essex. You've had your share of perk tests, right?
I sure have.
So what's a perk test?
Well, that stands for a percolation test. And it's a field test to simulate how wastewater will travel down through the soil once a septic system is built on top of it.
How fast it'll pass through, sort of like water going down through the coffee grounds in a filter.
That's a good analogy, yes.
Right. Okay. So what have you done to get us to this point?
Well, previous to this, we dug several deep holes, about 10 feet down into the ground.
Okay.
That allowed us to get a look at the various soil layers that you're going to find whenever you dig here in New England.
All right, so this is topsoil. What are you seeing? What am I seeing?
Well, as you just mentioned, this is your topsoil. Then you go through a layer known as subsoil. You then finally get down to a layer that is really the glacial material. In other words, the glacier brought it in.
Yeah.
We have determined that this is the most restrictive or most limiting layer in the soil profile. And the septic system code requires that we actually perform the perk test in that most limiting
So
layer.
you're testing at almost the worst place.
The worst place that you're going to have underneath that system. That's correct.
So that looks pretty dense right here. So not accept water too well.
That's exactly right. So what we did after that is, knowing what we had in the deep holes, we just had the machine dig down a shelf to the top of that most restrictive layer.
Right.
And we're ready to dig a perk hole that's about 12 inches in diameter and about 18 inches deep.
Okay.
Then we're going to fill that hole with water and let the hole sit for a little while to make it saturated. That will be a great simulation of how soil will behave when it's wet underneath the leach facility. Then we will use a ruler to watch the rate at which the water drops down through the hole over time.
Yeah.
And that will give us what's called a perk rate, or percolation.
So what happens if the rate doesn't drop fast enough?
If it doesn't drop fast enough, that would be a limitation to the site that you may not be able to build a septic system in this particular location.
Important test then.
It is very important. And I'm just going to take this water, pour it into the hole against a board that I've already got set up.
What's the board do?
What this does is it puts the hole very gently so that we do not fill up the fine material in there.
Yeah.
And we want to bring this water level up to about 12 inches, and we're going to maintain that level for about 15 minutes, again, to simulate saturated conditions in the soil.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll check that. We're about 9 so far, so we're going to need another bucket of water.
All right, Brendan, it has been 15 minutes.
We want to see the time it takes to go from 9 inches down to 6 inches. Well, it dropped down to 6 inches in about 27 minutes.
So is that good?
Yeah, I've seen quicker than that, but it's somewhere right in the middle.
But you're telling us that we passed the test, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So it's something as rudimentary as that in order to do a perk test to see if you could put in a septic system, just to see how well that the ground absorbs the water at its most restrictive layer. That's basically what a perk test is. Because some of these communities may not be located anywhere by city services that you could tie into. So this is how they do a percolation test for those that need that septic systems. Okay, so subdividing land. The subdivider seeks out raw land that they could profitably subdivide. They determine if the proposed use is consistent with zoning. They locate financial backers, and then they initiate their marketing strategies. So yeah, they do a lot of stuff before they even buy the property, because when they put an offer in on the property that they want to develop, they make that offer subject to, it's based on a contingency, them able to get all the all the permits, all the zoning, the testing that they do would allow for the development to be built. So they put a lot of subject to clauses, a lot of contingencies in their purchase contracts when they're buying land to subdivide like this. And then title to the individual parcels is transferred as lots are sold using a blanket mortgage that has that partial release clause, if you recall, that allows them to sell a smaller lot off of a larger one without having to pay back the entire loan in one shot. They just pay back a portion as the smaller lots are sold off of the larger one. And then impact fees, these are paid to the municipality by the developer in order to help the community cope with the added demand of the city services from that that development that they are making. Because there's going to be an additional tax depending on the size of the subdivision. There's going to be taxing on the city services for the use of police, fire, schools, garbage, public works, water, sewage demands, etc. So I refer to them as the legal bribes, though, that they need to be negotiated and paid to the municipality to get approvals for certain projects. Now, there's other ways that some mayors are getting around this to build all these luxury high rises all over the place for the affordable and low income housing, which a lot of it is not. You know, it used to be they asked for money from the developers or them to donate a garbage truck or a couple of police cars or something, or build a school, depending on the size of their project. But I see some mayors, they're not even doing the impact fees charging. They're going through some other program that the state has, which I still have not figured out how they're doing that yet. But they're getting money to give to the developer, the city. So I'm not sure where that's coming from. Now, the municipality can ask for those donations, those impact fees, like I said, to be a fire truck, a garbage truck, a street sweeper, police cars, or even build a school, depending on the size of the project. So just right here that on page 341 that they use a blanket mortgage with a partial release clause. So it says title to the individual parcels as subdivided land is transferred as the lots are sold. Using a blanket mortgage, which we learned about in those last couple of chapters we did, with a partial release clause. And then highlight impact fees. Impact fees you'll need to know for exam. Now, most subdivisions, they're laid out by use of lot and block. I already showed you how tax maps work, where they have lot and block numbers. Well, these subdivisions, they work the same way. So an area of land is designated as a block, and the individual lots, well, those are lots. So both lots and blocks are numbered consecutively.
Got it.
Got it.
Yep. So blanket mortgage, if you remember, it's a loan that's used, it's secured by more than one lot. It's actually using one large lot that's then subdivided, and they allow you, it has like a modified alienation clause in it that allows you to sell off smaller lots off of the larger one without having to pay off the whole entire loan, like a alienation clause would require. So that would be what's called the partial release clause. It's kind of like that modified alienation clause that would allow you to do that. So remember, like you have the one property, and then it's subdivided, and then you could sell off one lot. Then you pay back 1/6 of the loan. You sell off another, then you pay off another portion. You got to pay back the loan. So once again, there's a subdivisions. You could see the lot and block numbers and all the individual lots on the block. So you see each block is numbered. They have their own number. So this is a tax map, but subdivisions work the same way. I mean, tax maps are based on your city is basically made up of a bunch of subdivisions that make up the town. See? So you have a lot number, a block number, and then you have consecutively numbered lots that go all the way around that block. Now, subdividers, part of the land planning process, they got to decide, well, how are we going to lay out the streets? Are they going to use a gridiron pattern or a curvilinear pattern or some other design? This is the classic way, the gridiron pattern. And then how are they going to lay out the lots? Are they going to cluster them like with the clustered estates so that they could have a bunch of lots, smaller lots, and put them closer together so that they have more open space and parkland? Or are they going to allow people to have larger properties? And then you have parkland here and here. Both of these subdivisions have approximately the same amount of housing units, just off by 2. And it's just that the clustered estates has a lot more parkland. Look, 23.5 acres of parkland versus 1.6 acres of parkland here. I mean, how much open space and parkland do you need? You know, I guess in tighter subdivisions like with the clustered estates, I guess that's I guess in condo complexes they could do that, you know, and have more open space at the so you don't got to take care of grass and stuff like that, but you really don't have much of a yard for yourself. All right, and then here's that small subdivision with 8 lots where here's the outline of your property, and then you have that street that comes in, which you see outlined in red here with the cul-de-sac at the end. And so here's the road, and then you could turn off onto this cul-de-sac street. So it's a street that was built on your property here, and then that property is subdivided into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lots. Right? Then you pull out of your driveway onto the street here, and then pull out. You know, now is that street going to remain private, or are they going to dedicate it? That means they're going to give it to the municipality. Well, that should be written somewhere on the subdivision map when they submit the plans for approval. A plat is a map of a subdivision indicating the location and boundaries of each of the individual properties. It's also considered a legal description of land that we'll be going over in Chapter 19. So let's highlight a plat of a subdivision is a map of the development indicating the location and boundaries of the individual property. And that's exactly what it does, because you locate the property by lot and block number, and then you could see the boundary lines, you know, of the width and the length of the property, and you can see the outlines. Hey, everybody got that?
Got it.
So part of land planning is, you know, any covenants and restrictions that they're going to be placing in the deeds. You know, those private parties, the subdividers, they would do that as well. They're the owner of the land before they sell it to anybody, right? So they could place restrictions in deeds. Governments can't do that. They have their own restrictions and through zoning laws and through their police power. So these restrictions are called restrictive covenants that are placed in property by private parties. They're placed in deeds by the owner, subdivider, private parties, not the government puts restrictions in deeds. And, you know, the government, they have their own powers. And then deeds that have restrictions in them are called defeasible fee, conditional fee, or fee determinable estates. So fee determinable, defeasible, and conditional fee estates. We went over those in Chapter 6. And a moratorium is a halt to development in the area. It's important for a developer to record their permits and approvals for subdivision in the public records. In the event a moratorium, they could continue their project if they recorded all of their approvals. But if they didn't, they cannot. They cannot continue or start their project. If the government calls a moratorium for whatever reason, environmental issues or whatever their reason is, moratorium is what? It's a halt to further development in the area. And the FHA does have minimum standards for their construction materials that can be used, and occupancy, they have restrictions on that, where the majority of the owners in new subdivisions have to be owner occupied before you could get an FHA loan. It's part of their approval process for those subdivisions. And development costs are estimated to be 4 to 6 times the cost of the raw land when they're developing a subdivision. When you take into consideration all their other expenses of construction, marketing, legal fees, engineering, all that stuff. And density zoning is zoning that restricts the maximum number of homes that can be built per acre. Or another way of saying that, it's zoning for the most homes that can be built per acre. How dense can you put them together? How close can you put them together to maximize how many homes you could build per acre? All right. You may want to copy down these notes now. Getting bombarded with calls today.
Got it.
Right. You got it too, Alexis?
Got it.
All right. All right, so okay, this is the same stuff, just highlight these notes as well. These are things that we just went over on the previous slide. And that one, I put all this stuff on that one little slide. And now we're just going over the highlights, just doing all the highlights for it and putting the notes in. I got a note here for this first thing that's highlighted, that you don't need to highlight it or know it for exams about the 4 to 6 times the cost of the raw land to create the subdivision. It's just an interesting little factoid there for you. But density zoning, highlight that. You'll need to know that.
Got it.
All right.
Got it.
All right. Now, problems with the past use of land, such as soil contamination. Future buyers may face liability for the cleanup under CERCLA, because we learned that under CERCLA, it is the homeowner that's responsible for, the property owner that's responsible for any contamination on their property. whether or not they're the cause of that contamination. So before any subdivisions can be made, they need to get the developers need to get an EIS, an environmental impact study done. These reports on the impact of the project to the environment here. They require first study of the soil, making sure that there's no contamination in the ground, so that future buyers, where they're buying new construction, you would figure that the ground's not contaminated where that where that new construction is, right? Well, don't assume anything. We've had brand new construction developments done right over former toxic waste, contaminated land, garbage dumps. Take a look at Staten Island. Most of that was built on a former garbage dump, and they talk about dirty Jersey, right? So it's required before any federal project that affects the quality of life, contamination. It requires info about planned project and possible solutions. Environmental impact, check for contamination. Or maybe there's some rare species of animal on the property. Well, that could put a total halt to your project indefinitely. They find that there's a rare tadpole that was never seen before, and it's found on this property. You ain't getting a permit to do that construction. They do traffic studies and drainage issues. They study the drainage issues, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All part of the EIS, the environmental impact studies. So if human remains were ever found on the property, ooh, it is a crime scene. Is it? Or maybe it's something historical significance. Maybe a battle was fought there. We need to find out. So that's going to put a halt to the project, right? If they're digging the ground and they find human remains, is this a crime scene they need to determine, or is this historical site of significance? So we're going to first need to get the police in. Coroner will come in, tell you if those are old bones, or if it's something new, if it's a crime. Crime scenes, well, they're definitely going to delay the project for a little while. But if it's something of historical significance, that could have a major impact. Well, take a look at where the World Trade Centers were, right? They built that Freedom Tower. You guys see what they found underneath the World Trade Centers when they were digging up all the, all of the building remains that collapsed from the building that collapsed, and then they had to build a new foundation, so they had to dig it deeper. Did you guys ever hear of what they found under there? They found an old ship underneath those, because you had the World Trade Centers, and then you had floors and floors of parking garages underneath it. Underneath all of them, they found an old pirate ship. Well, it wasn't a pirate ship, but they found an old vessel there from around the time before our country was created. So here's a little video on that. Check this out. Sorry, I muted the volume on here for a second. Let me get that back up there, but there's a commercial.
More savings.
There we go.
Can't hear it.
I can't hear.
Yeah, the whole block was filled in.
What's the matter? You can't hear it?
No, we can't hear it.
You can't hear it?
No, it sounds real low.
Really? Okay, let me optimize the video here, and that's weird. I got it. Okay, babe.
between about 1790s and the 1830s.
So,
Yeah, well, it's a pretty significant find. It's the kind of thing that archaeologists are always hoping to find in the deposits. It's a ship. It was probably put here around in the early 1800s. We know that this area, this whole block, was filled in between about 1790s and the 1830s. So we figure the ship probably predates that and was used as part of the landfilling process. So they filled the ship with dirt and rocks, and in conjunction with timber cribbing features or landfill retaining structures on either side, sunk them to the bottom of the river and used it to create new land along the waterfront. At this point, we really don't know much. So we kind of just have to continue our analysis, see what what's under the boat, what's in the dirt around it, and see if that can tell us anything. We're assuming it was placed here in the early 1800s based on historic maps and how they show us how the shoreline progressed. Basically, they would just sink it little by little and gradually extend the shoreline, and usually build new wharves and piers out into the river, leaving a slip in between so boats could continue to sail in and out. And then as waterfront land became more and more valuable and more necessary, they would continue filling in and extending the shoreline gradually. And it's tied into commerce and trade of the early 19th century. There have been ships found in the city before. There was a famous one on Water Street found in the early 1980s. And it's the kind of thing that everyone always hopes to find. It's an exciting find. It's a big find. It's something that's interesting. We can get a lot of information about it. It's a very unique part of history that, we wouldn't have access to otherwise.
So that definitely put a hamper on the project there. When there's when you find something of historical significance, even this when they had the urgency of building this Freedom Tower after the World Trade Center, in place of the World Trade Center, it even hampered that project and delayed it. As you could see, you got construction people working around them in different areas, but they're not in that particular area where they found that ship. But it turns out that, New York City is on a peninsula, and that peninsula was, built up over the years. New York City used to be very narrow. And so where the World Trade Centers were, that all used to be water. So they actually built the land up from there all the way out. That's pretty far inland these days, right? Where the Freedom Tower is sitting. Just imagine blocks and blocks and blocks, all of those blocks after that, where you got these skyscrapers standing, that all used to be water. That's all man-made land right there. So that's interesting. But so they found that that old ship that was sunk there to try to build up the land. But if you look up the documentary on that, I think the History Channel, or is it the History Channel or Discovery Channel websites, you could find, they got videos on YouTube about it or on their websites about it. Just, look up World Trade Center or Freedom Tower and the ship that they found. Because they actually found some stuff in it too. They carbon dated the wood, which was interesting. They carbon dated it and found that some of those timbers were coming from the same place where they got the wood to make the Liberty Bell. Yeah, interesting little factoids there, But all right, so environmental issues. Let's see those EIS studies. Okay, we already went over them. All that was on that one slide as well. So let's just highlight the EIS studies now.
Got it.
All right. And then we have the New Jersey DEP. Before any construction can take place in environmentally sensitive areas, you got to first get permission from the DEP, the Department of Environmental Protection. That's a New Jersey agency. State agencies often take up duties of federal agencies when they're available. So the New Jersey DEP was put in charge to handle anytime construction wants to get done in the wetlands area of the state. They were given that authority to regulate those areas under the Wetlands Protection Act of 1970. In the highlands of the state, under the Highlands Water Protection Act, the Pinelands Protection Act, the coastal areas, CAFRA, and the waterfront under the Waterfront Development Act. So developers and builders could consult a guide called BYBOB. That stands for Before You Buy, Before You Build. And it lets them know who they need to, if they need to get permission from the environmental agencies in certain areas before they could start any of their construction. It's a reference to them. But for us, as if you get any of this crap on exam, which I doubt you will, what gives the DEP the authority to regulate certain areas? Well, it's usually a law that's named right after the area, the very area that they cover. Okay. As you can see, the wetlands, it's the Wetlands Protection Act. The Highlands Protection Act, and so on. All right. So the Highlands Water Protection Planning Act protects the drinking water when paving over 1 acre or more, or building over. And New Jersey Pinelands Protection Act regulates 22% of the state's area, the Pinelands National Reserve, aka the Pine Barrens. Then we got the Wetlands Act. This requires a permit to excavate, fill, or build on certain areas, covers both coastal areas and inland freshwater areas. Then we have the Coastal Area Facility Review Act, CAFRA. Let's see, they regulate clustering for open space and planned unit developments by the shoreline there, the coastal area. And then you got the Waterfront Development Act, CAFRA. So the DEP must approve plans for waterfront developments on any navigable water or stream. After Sandy, FEMA redrew those flood maps too for the areas that they can cover. All right. Interstate Land Sales Full Disclosure Act. Rules are intended to protect people from unscrupulous developers and marketers, from undue sales pressure. Yeah, that's those timeshare sales. It says that buyers have 7 calendar days to cancel contracts for the purchase or lease of such lands. Advertisements for new construction for out-of-state properties marketed to New Jersey residents, and large in-state subdivisions with 100 lots or more, or as long as there's at least 10 units if there's common area elements involved, are covered under the Interstate Land Sales Full Disclosure Act. They stipulate that all contracts and disclosures must be available in the same language that the property is advertised in. We're not talking about your individual ads that advertise your services, but advertise a particular property if you're going to advertise in another language. All contracts and disclosures must be available in that same language that you advertised in. I believe we went over that in chapter 1. So the contracts and disclosures must be professionally translated, not by you, because you may be bilingual. It has to be done by a person who has legal knowledge and language knowledge to be able to make sure that when they translate it, they're not translating it into words that have separate legalese meanings to them. So this language requirement applies to all properties advertised in New Jersey, not just the new ones. From both in and out of state. All right. So here now we'll highlight those rules and the 7-day calendar, right of rescission, and the language thing on page 345 and 346.
Got it.
All right, so Interstate Land Sales Full Disclosure Act rules are intended to protect the public. Okay, this is all the stuff that we already read about. We did highlight, but I got these things here now. This was on the previous slide. And for certain subdivisions within the state, primarily those that involve common elements, condominiums, co-ops, planned unit developments, and townhouse developments, and for subdivisions with more than 100 lots or with homeowners association, they also fall under the Planned Real Estate Development Act within the state. And that's only for new construction that gives them the right to cancel a contract within 7 days. I need to get that highlighted, I guess. So that's the Interstate Land Sales Full Disclosure Act. To that. Oh, what the hell? Got that?
Got it.
Now, it deals with new construction. That's what this says here, new construction with my chicken scratch. It says the registration and disclosure requirements apply to the original offering, not to single resales. That means new construction. Ooh, it's windy out there today, huh? All right, so the UCC, the last chapter 17, we went over a UCC, which is the Uniform Commercial Code, which regulated the sale of businesses. This is the UCC, the Uniform Construction Code. That's the state's minimum standard for construction. And the state maintains that database at the DCA of all those building enforcement codes that need to be adhered to by any contractors and inspectors. And they regulate the construction, alteration, renovation, occupancy, and use of all buildings. So if your municipality doesn't have its own building code enforcement officials, somebody from the DCA is going to come down and inspect those buildings. And schools, well, they always inspect commercial buildings and schools, but and large shopping centers and and any building with 3 or more units, not counting the unit the landlord lives in. They always get inspected by the DCA, but the smaller residential projects, less than 3 units, buildings with less than three units, they're inspected by the local code enforcement official. So it's the state's minimum standard for construction for building. That's the UCC. All right. And this is good to know. I wrote a little note here, put a little bracket around there. That's good to know that when you do work on your property, some people don't want to do work on their property because they think that now they're going to have to bring their whole building up to code or their whole property up to code. And that's not the case. So existing structures, they don't need, when the building code has been updated and has new requirements, you don't need to bring your old building up to code unless it's found to be unsafe. If you do any alterations to the building, any improvements, only that new, the stuff that you did the work on needs to be brought up to code. You don't need to then renovate the entire building and bring the whole building up to code. That's the fear of some people, but that's not true. It's only when the value, when the construction exceeds 50% of the value of the building, the property, that the entire building would then need to be brought up to code. I had to inform several clients about this in the past. All right. Now, all new construction in the state of New Jersey comes with a 10-year builder's warranty. It's required by law. It's called the New Home Warranty Builders and Registration Act. It requires that all builders of new homes have to register a warranty against new home defects for up to 10 years. They purchase that warranty and they register it through the DCA. So the DCA in Trenton has a record of all these warranties from all new construction that gets done by builders, because they buy those warranties through the DCA. So if there's ever issues with it, they're insured through those warranties that they bought through the DCA. Now, it is a 10-year warranty. I know it says for up to 10 years. It is a 10-year warranty. It's just that warranty only covers certain things. The first year, like the first 3 years, everything is covered. After the first 3 years, it may not cover the HVAC system anymore, but then structural integrity and all that other stuff is still covered, so it covers different things for different periods of time, up to the maximum of that 10-year warranty. Now, enforcement, if there's no local building code enforcement inspectors in your municipality, the state inspectors from the DCA come down to inspect. Construction permits must be issued before any construction, alteration, demolition, or change of use or occupancy of a building can be undertaken. Okay, you guys got this here, Warranty and Builders Registration Act, and that it's 10 years?
Got it.
You will get that on exam too, I'm pretty sure. So how do construction permits work? Well, the UCC, that's the Uniform Construction Code, requires that a construction permit be issued before any construction, alterations, demolition, or change of use of a building can be undertaken. Applicants have to provide information like the location of the property, the construction plans, the estimated cost of the work, names and addresses of the owners, and designated contractors that are going to be doing the work. The local construction official then must inspect the application and the property to determine whether it conforms with the requirements of the code. Within 20 days, they must either approve the plans and issue a permit or reject it in writing with the cause of the rejection. If rejected, the applicant may revise their plans to meet the requirements or appeal their rejection to the Construction Board of Appeals. Now, once the construction permit is issued, it may be revoked if it contains any false or misleading info or omissions, or if the construction is not started within 12 months of the issuance of the permit, or if work is suspended for 3 months or more after the work has begun. That's how the construction permitting process works. For you too, for your own home. So here's where I got all this is from. But let's just task of administrating and enforcing the code. They're talking about the building codes. And the Uniform Construction Code requires a construction permit to be issued by each county or municipality before any construction, alteration, demolition, or change of use of a building can be undertaken. So that's all I have you highlight there. All right. Now, before anybody can occupy a structure after it's been constructed, you got to get an inspection to show that it is fit for human habitation and there's no condition that causes the threat to the health or safety of any of the occupants. With new construction, it is always called a CO, the construction permit. Now, as far as existing structures that get work or just simply don't have work, but just the transfer of ownership, it may have different names depending on the municipality. Some municipalities, they just call all these permits a CO. Others that are little sticklers, they may have different names for them, like a COC for Certificate of Compliance. That's for work done on existing structures, not new construction. Or a CCO, that's a Continued Certificate of Occupancy. That's for any time that we change the use, change the change of use or ownership. You sell the property, you got to get a CCO. No work was done to it, we're just transferring ownership. So we got to get a CCO. Now, like I said, many municipalities, they don't deal with these different names. They just all call them all a certificate of occupancy. But some do go by the different naming convention. CO for new construction, COC for existing properties that had work done, and a CCO when there's just a simple transfer of ownership. So you guys get that highlighted on page 347 and 348.
Got it.
Okay.
Got it.
So smoke detectors have to be on each level of a building and within 10 feet of any sleeping quarters. Carbon monoxide detectors with 10-year sealed non-replaceable batteries must be installed as of the 2019 update to the law. Homes built after 1978 require hardwired detectors. Most municipalities require one on each level, as well as hardwired with battery backups. They like that battery backup because sometimes if there's a fire in a house, it can melt the wires and then the alarm doesn't work. So a lot of fire inspectors, they want them to have those battery backup detectors. Because you get some people that are insistent, well, I got mine connected to an alarm service, that they monitor it. Okay, well, what good is that going to do you if the wires melt? There's no communication. It doesn't work no more, but the batteries at least keep going on it. All right, now, fire extinguishers must be mounted in the kitchen or within 10 feet of them using the hardware they came with, and they must be rated to put out ABC type fires and must be under 10 pounds. Well, guess what? That's no longer the case because our governor that is exiting the state right now decided that he was going to change that law for some reason this month or last month. So, what is that? As of, I'm going to say 3/20/25. It is no longer required by state law. However, put this so you can read it. Come to the front. However, local fire officials may still require them. So those fire extinguishers are no longer required according to state law. However, the local fire enforcement inspectors, they may still require them. Those small fire extinguishers under 10 pounds so that you could easily, quickly grab them and extinguish your child when they're on a fire, if they have a grease fire on them, so that the parent doesn't just throw water on them, because that's the worst thing you could possibly do for a grease fire. I have no idea why he would get rid of that that requirement. It's been a requirement for a while now. When we've seen a rash of instances where children were reaching up to the stoves when mommy was cooking, and then the handles, they'd grab the handles, the pot or pan would fall on them. They'd get hot grease all over them. If they burst in flames, And then the horrified parent's first reaction is when there's a fire, you throw water on it. However, it's the worst thing you could do for a grease fire because it just ignites it even further. It spreads it. They came up with this requirement to have these fire extinguishers rated to put out ABC type fires, which includes grease fires, that you could easily, quickly grab to be mounted in the kitchen as a result of all these fires that happened within a short period of time and these tragic instances where somebody's child is on fire and then the parents throw water on it and then it just gets worse. So I'm not sure why our governor, our exiting governor, has removed this requirement now. But anyway, it's not a state requirement, but it may still be a local requirement. So I would still look for them. I would still advise people to put them in there, but it's not a requirement. You'd have to check with each municipality. It's not a requirement according to state law anymore, but you'd need to check with each municipality to see if it's their requirement. Okay, that's right. Okay. You guys got those highlights in those notes?
You know that.
You know what? Let me even put this in a little highlight here. All right, so that went into law in 2025, that requirement for the fire extinguishers, when acting Governor Richard Cody was visiting with some fifth graders and discussing the fire safety after all these rash of fires that we had. And a fifth grader suggested to the governor of the state of New Jersey, why don't they just require fire extinguishers in the kitchen? And he was like, wow, what a good idea. And then he made it a law on the suggestion of a fifth grader. Interesting, huh? So A, B, C ratings for A is to put out trash, wood, and paper fires. B is to put out liquid gases and solvents. And C is rated to put out electrical fires. All right. Now, we also have the Hotel, Motel, Multiple Dwelling Health and Safety Law. This was enacted to ensure that residents in the state of New Jersey have decent standards and safe units of dwelling space. So a state inspection is often required, which we refer to as a green card inspection in the industry. This is our industry lingo here. We call it a green card inspection because it used to be that when you passed the inspection, they gave you a certificate and it was green in color. Okay, so that was the green card inspection. It must be performed at least once every 5 years, and it applies to buildings with 3 or more units, not counting the unit that the owner lives in. So a 3-family house that's non-owner occupied or a 4-family house that is, or more, requires that state inspection at least once every 5 years. Now, hotels and motels, they require an inspection at least once every 3 years, and often they do spot inspections. The state inspectors just pop in on them. I don't know, because you may be selling hotels and motels too. I don't know. So we got these requirements here. But you definitely need to know this one for the 3 or more units, not counting the one that the owner is living in. Okay, got to get that green card inspection. All right, and so let's highlight that now here in the book, page 348. They refer to it as the state green card inspection. That's the state inspection. Okay.
Got it.
Got it.
All right. And that concludes this chapter. Let's do key terms to review. Let me get to the shared drive and replace this slideshow because I made some modifications to it. So where are the slides? There we go. Boom, boom. There we go. It's been replaced. All right, let's do key terms to review, chapter 18. There's only one of them. It's a long set though. Charges to developer for extra roads, schools, and so forth. What do we call those charges?
Impact fees.
Impact fees, 7 is A. Test of the soil's absorption and drainage capacities.
Percolation test.
Vacation.
Yeah, it's the perk test, the percolation test. 10 is B. Division of property into more than one building lot.
Subdivision. Subdivision.
It's classified as a subdivision. 16 is C. Community with dense zoning and developers plan for the entire use of the land.
Density zoning.
Density zoning.
No. Community with dense zoning and developers plan for the entire use of the land.
No.
What are you gonna say?
Clustering.
Oh, no.
No, that's not clustering. That's
No. It's the planned unit development. 12 is D. Group setting standards for local subdivisions. What do we call that group that sets the standards and reviews them?
Bureau.
Bureau of Subdivided
of-
Lands.
Divided land sales control.
Nope. The group that sets standards for all local subdivisions. Local subdivisions.
Planning board.
That would be the planning board. Each community has their own planning board. 13 is E. A halt to development in the area. Moratorium, yes, correct. Moratorium. 9 is F. New Jersey standard for building. What do we call New Jersey standard for building and construction?
Uniform Construction Code.
It is. 17 is G, the UCC. U.S. requirement that some developments be registered with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the CFPB. A United States, the U.S. requirement that some developments be registered with the CFPB.
What? No.
It's the Interstate Land Sales Full Disclosure Act. 8 is H. State regulations for builders of new homes. It's a
Warranty and
requirement.
Builder Registration Act.
Yes, the Warranty and Builders Registration Act, 18 is I. Permits buyers up to 7 calendar days to cancel contracts for the lease or purchase of such lands.
Oh, I was trying to remember that one. Wait.
What
Uh,
permits the buyers the 7 calendar days to cancel the purchase or lease of such lands?
Real Estate Sale Full Disclosure Act.
Yes, 15 is J, the Real Estate Sales Full Disclosure Act. A law requiring a registration of certain developments within the state of New Jersey.
Is it a law requiring registration of certain developments within Jersey? Plan real no. Is it
Yeah, yeah, it is. It is.
Bureau of the
No,
Subdivision.
no, she had it. It's the Planned Real Estate Development Act. 11 is K. Zoning that allows more living units per acre than usual.
And Citizen.
Density zoning, 5 is L. A map of a town, section, or subdivision. What do we call that map?
what?
It's a plat map, or simply a plat. 14 is M, as in Mary. New Jersey state agency that approves and registers some out-of-state property.
Borough of Subdivided Land Sales Control.
Yep, 1 is N, the Bureau of Subdivided Land Sales Control. Local municipalities authorization for building plans.
Construction permit.
You got to get a permit, 3 is O. Engineering report often required before building permits are issued.
EIS.
The
Yeah.
EIS, the Environmental Impact Study, 6 is P. Turning over private property, subdivision streets to a
Dedication.
municipality.
Dedication.
4 is Q, dedication. And putting living units closer together to leave more open space is referred to as
Clustering.
clustering. 2 is R. Okay. By the way, that Bureau of Subdivided Land Sales Control, they're actually a part of the Real Estate Commission, and they also investigate like any property that's to be marketed in the state of New Jersey. They actually travel out to the state where it's located to make sure that new construction exists, and it's they've got all the permits and financing in place, and so they're not selling a bridge that goes to nowhere to people, so to speak, or selling them swampland in Florida, things like that. So it's actually one guy, I believe, that has that job with the Real Estate Commission. What a cushy job that is, right? You're paid, your job is to travel a lot, going to destination resorts all over that want to market their destinations in New Jersey. That they need to get the approval and pay for his travel, airfare, food, and all that, so he could come by and inspect them. Some job, huh? All right, let's do chapter 19. Chapter 19. Okay, so that concludes chapter 18.